The banana in your kitchen right now is a clone, not a metaphor, a literal genetic copy. Every yellow banana sold in an American or European supermarket is, for practical purposes, the same plant, the same variety, the Cavendish, reproduced not from seeds but from cuttings over and over until the entire global trade rests on one single organism, repeated 100 billion times. It is the most popular fruit in the United States. It is cheaper than almost anything else in the store, cheaper than an apple grown in the next state over, even though it was cut down green in the tropics and carried thousands of miles to reach you. It is soft, sweet, sold in every corner shop on earth, and wrapped in a picture of pure sunshine and health. And it is dying. The banana you eat is the second one to hold this position. The first, a richer, sweeter variety, was wiped from the global trade within living memory by a disease it had no defense against, precisely because it, too, was a single clone. We replaced it with the one you know now, and that one is now facing the exact same disease, spreading across the exact same plantations on a clock that is already running. But the disease is the least of it, because to understand how a fruit that cannot even reproduce on its own became the cheapest thing in your supermarket, you have to follow it back through a century of company towns and private armies, of a massacre in a Colombian railway town, and of a small green fruit that reached into sovereign nations and overthrew their governments. This is the history of the banana, and almost none of it is on the label. Let us start with the plant itself, because the plant is genuinely strange. A wild banana is not the thing you are picturing. It is a hard, stubby pod, packed so full of large black seeds that there is barely any flesh to eat. If you bit into one, you would find it closer to gravel than to fruit. These wild bananas grew across Southeast Asia and the islands of the Pacific, and they had done so for millions of years. Somewhere in the highlands of New Guinea, more than 7,000 years ago, human beings began to cultivate them. This is one of the oldest agricultural stories on the planet, older than a great deal of what we usually think of as the beginning of farming. And at some point in that long process, something remarkable happened. A rare natural mutation produced a banana with 3 sets of chromosomes instead of 2. That sounds like a small technical detail. It was not. A plant with 3 sets of chromosomes cannot produce viable seeds. It is sterile, and a sterile banana is, from the plant's point of view, a catastrophe, a dead end that cannot reproduce. But from a human point of view, it was perfect. No seeds meant soft, sweet, edible flesh all the way through. The only problem was that the plant could no longer make copies of itself, so human beings did it for them. Every one of these seedless bananas had to be propagated by hand, by taking a cutting, a shoot from the base of the plant, and replanting it. Which means every sweet banana is not a descendant of the one before it. It is a piece of the one before it. A clone. Hold on to that fact, because everything that follows grows out of it. Carried by farmers and traders, the banana spread west, out of the Pacific and across the Indian Ocean. It reached Africa thousands of years ago, so long ago that in parts of the continent it became a staple food older than memory. Arab traders carried it further, and it is from an Arabic word that many believe the name eventually came. In parts of East Africa, the banana became something more than a fruit. It became the foundation of whole cuisines and whole economies, a cooking staple eaten every day, mashed and steamed, as central to life there as bread or rice would be elsewhere. Some regions came to depend on it so completely that a single family might tend dozens of distinct varieties, each with its own name and use, a diversity that will matter a great deal later in this story. The ancient world knew of it too at the edges. When the armies of Alexander the Great pushed into India, Greek writers recorded a strange tree whose fruit was sweet and whose broad leaves could shelter a man, and Roman naturalists wrote of it as a marvel from the East. To them it was a rumor, a traveler's curiosity, not a food. By the time European sailors reached the coast of West Africa and the Canary Islands, the banana was waiting for them. And in the early 1500s, Portuguese and Spanish ships carried it across the Atlantic to the Caribbean, to the same warm islands that would soon grow sugar. For the next 3 centuries, that is roughly where the story rested. The banana was a tropical plant, grown and eaten near where it was cut. It was food for the people of the tropics, and a curiosity to almost everyone else. It bruised easily, it rotted fast. It could not survive a long journey. In the cold cities of North America and Europe, almost nobody had ever seen one. And a fruit nobody had seen was, to the right kind of mind, not a limitation. It was an opportunity. In 1876, the United States threw itself an enormous birthday party. The Centennial Exhibition in Philadelphia marked 100 years of independence, and among the machines and monuments, visitors could buy a strange yellow fruit, imported at great expense, wrapped in foil and sold for 10 cents apiece. 10 cents in 1876 was not nothing. People ate them carefully with a knife and fork. The banana arrived in the American imagination as a luxury, an exotic novelty from somewhere warm and far away. The men who turned that novelty into an empire were not scientists or farmers. They were shippers. The problem had always been time. A banana cut ripe in the tropics was mush before it reached a northern port. But a banana cut green and moved fast enough and kept cool enough would ripen on the journey and arrive perfect. Solve the logistics, and you did not have a fruit. You had a machine for turning distance into money. A Cape Cod ship captain named Lorenzo Dow Baker worked out that if he loaded green bananas in Jamaica and sailed hard for Boston, he could sell them ripe and make a fortune. He was right. His trade grew into the Boston Fruit Company. Further south, a young American named Minor Keith was trying to build a railway across Costa Rica, and it was killing his workers by the thousand. The terrain was brutal, the fever relentless, and the dead were counted in the thousands, among them, by his own account, several of his own brothers. To feed the survivors and to give the railway something to actually carry, he planted bananas along the tracks. The railway nearly bankrupted him. The bananas made him one of the most powerful men in the hemisphere, and once the fruit was cheap and plentiful, it had to be sold. So the companies taught people how to want it. They printed pamphlets with recipes and told mothers the banana was clean, sealed by nature in its own wrapper, safe in an age terrified of germs and spoiled food. They put it in cookbooks and songs and later on screens wrapped in an image of the smiling, sunny tropics. The banana was not just shipped to the north. It was marketed there relentlessly, until a fruit almost nobody had seen in 1876 became, within a few decades, an ordinary part of breakfast. And this is the pattern to watch. The banana did not follow the railways and the ships. The banana paid for them. The infrastructure of entire nations, the ports, the rail lines, the telegraph wires, got built because a fruit needed to move. The technology caught up. Steamships got faster, refrigeration got better, and the price collapsed. Within a generation, the banana went from a 10-cent luxury eaten with a fork to the cheapest fruit in America, cheaper than apples, sold by the dozen, handed to children as an ordinary snack. It looked like a triumph of progress, a tropical delicacy made available to everyone at almost no cost. But that cost had not vanished. It had simply been moved somewhere the customer could not see, to the plantations and the company towns and the countries where the fruit was grown. And the company that had learned to move it best was about to become one of the most powerful forces in the Western Hemisphere. In 1899, Minor Keith's operations merged with the Boston Fruit Company, and the result was given a bland, reassuring name, the United Fruit Company. There was nothing bland about it. United Fruit did not simply buy and sell bananas. It set out to control every single link in the chain, from the soil to the store. It owned the land, millions of acres of it, far more than it ever planted, held in reserve so that no rival could use it. It owned the railways that crossed that land. It owned the ports where the fruit was loaded. It owned the telegraph lines that carried the messages. And it owned the ships, a vast fleet painted brilliant white to keep the cargo cool, known as the Great White Fleet. Across Guatemala, Honduras, Costa Rica, Colombia, and beyond, the company built entire towns from nothing. Housing, hospitals, schools, stores, all owned by United Fruit, all serving United Fruit, all paid for in wages that often came back to the company through the company store. To the people of the region, it did not have a polite name. They called it El Pulpo, the octopus, because its arms reached into everything. It reached into the mind as well. United Fruit understood earlier than almost anyone that how a thing is seen can matter more than what it is. It hired some of the first modern public relations men, the people who were then inventing the very craft of shaping public opinion, and it used them to wrap the company and later entire foreign policies in whatever story served it best. A banana was never only a banana, it was an image, carefully built and defended, and behind that image the company did as it pleased. And here is the part that is difficult to hold in your head. All of this, the fleet, the railways, the private towns, the reach into governments, existed to move a single, fragile, seedless fruit. One variety, in fact. The banana of this era was not the Cavendish you know. It was a richer, sweeter, sturdier variety called the Gros Michel, Big Mike. Every Gros Michel plant on every United Fruit plantation was, as we have said, a clone, genetically identical. Row after row, farm after farm, country after country, of the exact same plant. It made the operation beautifully efficient. Every bunch ripened the same, shipped the same, sold the same. It also meant that anything which could kill one plant could kill all of them. But that reckoning was still years away. For now, the company was at the height of its power, a private empire that could set prices, move borders, and make or break the economies of small nations with a decision made in a boardroom in Boston. A company that powerful does not stay out of politics. It cannot. And when its interests and the interests of a sovereign country finally collided, the company did not back down. It is here that the story stops being about fruit. In the town of Cienega in Colombia, in December of 1928, the banana workers of the United Fruit Company went on strike. Their demands were not radical, written contracts. An end to being paid in company coupons instead of money. Basic medical care. The right to be treated as employees rather than as something the company could disown whenever it was convenient. Thousands of them gathered in the town square with their families on a Sunday night waiting. The Colombian government, worried about the strike and under pressure from the interests tied to the fruit trade, sent in the army. The soldiers set up their machine guns around the square. An order was read, giving the crowd a few minutes to disperse. Then the soldiers fired into the crowd. The number of people killed that night has never been settled. The official figure was small. Other accounts put it in the hundreds or higher. The bodies, by several accounts, were carried away by train and never accounted for. It entered the country's memory as the Banana Massacre, and years later, the writer Gabriel Garcia Marquez would fold it into one of the most famous novels ever written, describing the dead loaded onto railway cars like discarded fruit. I want to be careful here because the precise numbers are contested and always will be. But strip away the argument over figures and what remains is simple. Workers asked to be paid in money instead of coupons, and they were answered with machine guns. There is a phrase you already know that comes from this world: Banana Republic. Today, it is the name of a clothing store. It began as a description coined by an American writer for a small nation whose politics, economy, and very government had been captured by a foreign fruit company. It was not a joke. It was a diagnosis, and it was about to be proven completely in Guatemala. By the 1950s, United Fruit was the largest landowner in Guatemala, and most of the land it held, it did not farm. It kept it idle in reserve. Then Guatemala elected a president named Jacobo Arbenz, who proposed something genuinely threatening: a land reform. The government would buy back unused land and give it to peasant farmers to work, and it offered to pay the company compensation based on the value the company itself had declared for tax purposes. The company had, of course, declared a very low value to avoid taxes. Now it insisted the land was worth vastly more, and it did not simply negotiate. It went to Washington. United Fruit was extraordinarily well connected, tied by friendship and business to the most senior figures in the American government of the day. And it turned its public relations machine on the American public, running a campaign to convince newspapers, congressmen, and ordinary citizens that a modest land reform in a small country was, in fact, a Soviet foothold in the Western Hemisphere. It was one of the most successful propaganda operations of its era, and it worked. The land reform was recast as an emergency. And in 1954, the Central Intelligence Agency ran an operation that overthrew the elected government of Guatemala. Arbenz fell. What followed was not a return to calm. It was a slide into decades of military rule and a civil war that would eventually cost somewhere around 200,000 lives, most of them civilians. A democratically elected government was removed, and a country was pushed into 40 years of bloodshed. And the interest at the center of it, the interest that helped set it in motion, was the price of a fruit that sells today for pennies. Nobody at the company was ever meaningfully punished for any of this. The men who ran it lived comfortable lives and died respected. The cost, as always, was paid somewhere the customer could not see. While the company was reaching into governments, something quiet and unstoppable was moving through the soil. It was a fungus. It is called Panama disease, and it attacks the banana plant through its roots, choking off its ability to draw water until the plant wilts and dies. It cannot be sprayed away. It lives in the soil for decades, and once it is in a field, that field is finished for bananas. Remember that every Gros Michel plant was a clone, genetically identical to every other. That sameness was the whole point. It was also now a death sentence, because a disease that could kill one Gros Michel could kill all of them, and it did. Plantation by plantation, country by country, Panama disease moved through the Gros Michel, and there was nothing to stop it. The company abandoned infected land and moved on, buying and clearing new ground, but the fungus followed. By the middle of the 20th century, the Gros Michel, the sweeter, richer banana that the entire trade had been built on, was finished as a global product. The banana your grandparents ate simply ceased to exist in the shops. The industry was saved by a replacement, a variety that happened to resist Panama disease. It was blander. It bruised more easily. It had been rejected before precisely because it was inferior. But it survived, and once the shippers adapted their methods to handle it, it took over completely. Its name was the Cavendish. It is the banana in your kitchen right now. It is worth sitting with what that change actually meant. An entire global industry did not adapt its single crop, or diversify it, or learn the obvious lesson that planting one identical plant everywhere is a standing invitation to disaster. It simply found one more clone that happened to survive this particular enemy, planted that one everywhere instead, and carried on exactly as before. The vulnerability was never fixed. It was postponed. The company changed too, though not in the ways you might hope. United Fruit merged and was renamed United Brands. In 1975, its chairman, a man named Eli Black, was found to have arranged a large secret bribe to an official in Honduras to lower the tax on bananas. When the scandal broke, Black had already taken his own life, stepping out of a high window of a Manhattan skyscraper. The press called the affair Bananagate. The company was renamed again into the cheerful brand you see in the supermarket today, with a smiling woman in a fruit hat on the sticker. And even that new, friendly company would later admit in a United States court to paying millions of dollars over years to violent armed groups in Colombia, groups responsible for countless killings. It called the payments protection. It paid a fine. The bananas kept moving. The name on the sticker had changed. The pattern under it had not. So here is where we stand. The banana you buy today is the Cavendish, and the Cavendish, like the Gros Michel before it, is a single clone, grown in vast identical plantations across the tropics. It is cheap for exactly that reason. Uniformity is efficient. One plant, endlessly copied, ripening the same, shipping the same, sold the same, all over the world. And a new strain of Panama disease has arrived. It is called Tropical Race 4, and unlike the strain that killed the Gros Michel, this one can kill the Cavendish. It has already spread out of Asia, into Australia, into Africa, into the Middle East, and it has now reached the banana plantations of Latin America. It moves in soil, on boots, on tools, on water. There is no cure, and it is threatening to do to the Cavendish exactly what its ancestor did to the Gros Michel. We are, in other words, watching the same story begin again. A single clone, planted everywhere, undone by the very sameness that made it cheap. The industry is racing to breed or engineer a resistant banana before the Cavendish follows Big Mike into memory. It may succeed, it may not. But step back from the disease for a moment, because the disease is only the final irony. The banana in your bowl is one of the most extraordinary objects in your kitchen. It is a sterile mutant that cannot reproduce without human hands. It is a clone that has been copied, unchanged, for longer than most nations have existed. It made men into kings. It built railways and ports and drew the borders of company towns. It was defended with machine guns in a Colombian square. It was used to help topple an elected government and push a country into 40 years of war. And it is sold to you, wrapped in a picture of a smiling cartoon and a promise of health and sunshine, for less than almost anything else you can buy. Now you know what is on the label, and now you know what is not. If this stayed with you, subscribe. We publish a new deep dive into the hidden history of everyday food and drink every week. Leave a comment and tell me whether you had ever heard of the banana massacre before this video, and give it a like so more people find the real story. Thank you for watching.